Now, the government, there's a reason we have privacy from the government, and a reason why the old systems were written with privacy as the paramount, because governments are nosy, and when they have information, they always find a way to use it. They're never passive, they're always intrusive. Now, people say, oh, but how do we know what goods and services are being sold? Well, the sellers have to report what they're selling, but the government does not need to know who is buying what. That is private information and should not be available to governments because they will misuse it.
That's right.
And I'm sure coming into this net zero world, if the government wants to do something like push a green agenda, well, they're going to start saying, well, we're just going to add additional fees every time you buy a meat product or every time you buy something that we don't like, because they'll have the ability to see what you're purchasing and either stop the purchase or, tax it further. But I mean, there was one guy was floating an idea of a service station where you open the door and you aren't able to buy certain products if you've already bought something that week. This is all linked into the digital ID
Well,
idea and social credits. I mean, is this the future that we really want as a free country?
The social credits, I think, is the point there. So what we've seen as well is the introduction of this idea of a national digital identity. So if you tie those three pieces of the puzzle together and you look at the national digital identity, the central banking digital currency, and then this sort of granular control that people have sort of shown that they are prepared to accept during COVID, and you put those three pieces together, you get a pretty doomsday sort of scenario. And I don't personally like the idea of them being able to track, every single thing that you do and then sort of have that feed in through your identity into a profile about you. Now, governments change, right? So you might say, well, look, I don't particularly like this government or whatever, but, overall, we've got a reasonable country here, and, I don't think that the government's really interested in our day-to-day lives. Many people may take that opinion, but even if that were the case, governments do change. And what if you had a government that wasn't so benign at some point in the future? That information will not go away. That is a permanent record. And the sort of ultimate end of that, I guess, is what you see in China, where they very much do have that. And it's not just, a credit score that people have. Obviously, we have credit scoring already, but to extend that into a social score, which is based on everything that you do and whether or not that's approved activity, and then to sort of have that impact on your ability to participate within society. That's not a great position to be in.
Oh, there's a huge difference between having a credit score that says, gee, you suck at saving, so we're not going to lend you much money, and having a social credit score which says you disagree with the government, therefore you can't partake in civilization. Those two things are worlds apart, and they make a huge difference to the concept of freedom. And my worry is that Western governments don't seem to be very interested in ideas like freedom or liberty. They're far more interested in how can we control, how can we make the public better able to give us more money in taxation, and how can we coerce people into making economic decisions that benefit our mates that we're getting kickbacks from. That's where we seem to be heading toward. And I don't like how ambivalent people are, because as I said a million times, our civilization will be destroyed from laziness and convenience, not by a foreign army. Now, there are plenty of young people who'd give up their freedoms if the government promised them to pay their Netflix bill or, started shouting them for their Uber. Is it a sad reality of our age that the youth who have never lived through true hardship are so willing to invite the big state straight into their backyard?
Yes, I think that's absolutely true. I think it's an apathy where people haven't experienced hard times. I think it's also that they haven't got a deep enough understanding of history and what has actually occurred and where that ultimately leads to if you're not careful. So they're probably apathetic about it, and they're just taking the path of convenience and least resistance. So there are conveniences that come with giving up your privacy, just sort of letting big state occur. And if you look at it at surface level, there can be appeal in that. So if you just take the little carrot that's dangled and they say, here's a bit of money or here's some particular convenience, people jump on that bandwagon.